Okay, so now we have our two Windows systems installed. We have Metasploitable installed and we have Kali installed. Everything is up and running. Before we jump into setting up a domain controller, there's some tools we want to go ahead and install on Windows 10. So I'm going to jump over to the Win10 number 1. And what I have open is the walkthrough for this lab. This is open on the virtual machine. So there's a couple PowerShell scripts that we probably want to download. The first PowerShell script is a script that downloads and installs sysmon. Now we're going to talk about sysmon later, but for now, if you just run this script, it will go ahead and install it along with a configuration file. So you can just go ahead and select download anyway. In future lessons, we will actually tune a configuration file and change the configuration file. However, for now, we're going to run this script that installs it automatically, just so we get it up and running and there's logging taking place. The other downloads that we want to do are two Atomic Red Team scripts. So we'll talk about Atomic Red Team in the future also, but what that is a threat emulation platform. And basically every attack script is mapped to a specific MITRE ATT&CK technique or techniques. And what this script will do is a PowerShell script. It will automatically run these for you. Once again, we're just going to download them to get them on the system right now. And what we'll use them for in the future is to create events. So as I mentioned, the script emulates an actual attack. So it creates the kind of artifacts and activity that we want to be able to detect and investigate. So we'll download that one. And the next script is another Atomic Red Team script. But what this one does is it's a cleanup script. So basically what happens when we run the attack script is it will install things like persistence mechanisms, create new user, and that kind of activity. So what this cleanup script will do is literally just go through and clean it up. So it will uninstall the persistence mechanism and the user that it created. So that way we're not making any permanent changes to the virtual machine when we run the Atomic Red Team attack scripts. Now, I would still recommend using snapshots, which we'll talk about in the future. However, I would run the attack script to make sure it cleans everything up, or the attack cleanup script to make sure it cleans everything up. Okay, so to install those scripts, we need to open PowerShell. Let's open it as administrator. So the first thing that we need to do before we start running any PowerShell scripts is we want to change the execution policy to unrestricted. So if we just type this command here, it is set-execution policy unrestricted-force. So this will allow us to actually execute PowerShell scripts. And we've completed that. Now you can check that by just using the commandlet called get execution policy. And it tells us it's unrestricted. So now that it's unrestricted, we can navigate to where we downloaded the PowerShell scripts. Which was in the downloads folder. If you notice, what I'm doing is I start to type the path and then I hit the tab autocomplete because I'm a lazy typist and not a very good typer. So that just makes life so much easier. So now just to check to make sure that those scripts are where we think they are, we see them. So the two scripts that we want to run, or the one script that we want to run right now, is the install sysmon. It looks like I've got it in my downloads folder twice. Just need to run either of those scripts. And what they're going to do is it's going to reach out, download sysmon, download a configuration file, and then run it. Now we'll show how you can do that manually later, but as I mentioned earlier, this is just to make life easy right now. We want to create some logs and go ahead and start running. Now you can ignore some of this red stuff. What we're really looking for at the bottom is verifying if sysmon is running, and it says sysmon is running. Now we can confirm that by going to the Windows event viewer, or just the event viewer. We'll open it up. Basically what the event viewer is, this is how you view event logs. We'll go into a lot more detail on this when we get to the forensics portion. However, once you open event log, you want to select do a drop down from the application and services logs, then drop down at Microsoft, and then drop down at Windows. Then we want to scroll down. If the sysmon installation was successful, we can find it here and we can do the drop down. We want to select operational. Now sysmon is a great logging source. We'll talk about in detail later. However, it does not come installed by default on Windows systems, even though now sysinternals is a Microsoft product, but it does not come installed. But what we can see is we are definitely logging sysmon. For instance, event ID 1 is process create, and it tells you what process was created. We'll dive a lot more into that in the future. However, for now, we just wanted to make sure that sysmon is up and running. Okay, we'll go ahead and close out of event viewer. Everything's working fine. We can close PowerShell. The next thing we want to set up is we want to enable PowerShell script block logging. So to do that, we're going to do it through group policy. So you just start typing GP for GP edit, and we see edit group policy will pop up. So we'll select that. And then we're going to follow the path of computer configuration, administrative templates, Windows components, and then scroll down to Windows PowerShell. We select that and we see some options on the right side. So the first one that we want to enable for sure is the PowerShell script block logging. So we double click that, and now we can set this up. So all we have to do is enable. And then we will select log script block invocation start and stop events. And then we will click OK. So we can see now that it is enabled. And while we're here, we'll go ahead and we'll turn on PowerShell transcription. And we'll write it to C:/. I'm just going to store it inside Windows, because if we wanted to put it on a desktop or in my documents or someplace like that, we would have to do it for the specific user. So we'll go ahead and just save it in the Windows directory. That way it doesn't matter which user is on the system, we'll have access to those transcripts. Okay, so once we've done that, we can go ahead and close Group Policy Editor. Okay, so now we want to rename the workstation. So I'm just going to type name in the search bar, and then we're going to select View Your PC Name. Then select rename this PC. So typically, we're going to go with a naming convention. Most organizations will use some type of naming convention. I want to use WRK for workstation, and then price, the name of the user who this workstation is assigned to. Click Next. And now we need to restart the computer for that to take effect. What we want to do now is install Splunk. So if you don't already have a free Splunk account, you'll have to go online and sign up for one. In the walkthrough are the instructions. So just follow the link. You can sign up for your account if you don't already have an account. If you do have an account, you can go ahead and log in. Okay, scroll down to the bottom, select Access Program, and you see Splunk is downloading. All right, so Splunk is finished downloading. The install, since it is a .msi file, which is an installation file, is pretty simple. We can just right-click, choose Install. We can agree to the license agreement, click Next. Now we give it a username. And this will be the username for your local Splunk instance. Don't get confused with the username that you use to create your Splunk account. Click Next. We do want to go ahead and create a shortcut. And now Splunk will install. Now we will only be installing Splunk on one of our Windows VMs. The other one, we will install a different SIM. We just don't want two SIMs running on the same system. And there are some restrictions to the free Splunk account, including the amount of data that you can transfer in a given 24-hour time period. So we're just going to set it up on one Windows system at this time. So once it is finished installing, we can go ahead and click Finish, but we do want to go ahead and launch it in the browser. Now, what you will notice how you can access this Splunk is using your local IP address, or the loopback IP address, 127.0.0.1 at port 8000. You could also just type in localhost at port 8000. That will get you there also. So go ahead and log in with the credentials that you just created. Once again, not your Splunk account credentials, but for this specific Splunk instance. All right, so now you're at the administrator password, or the administrator dashboard. So the first thing we want to do is we want to install some Splunk apps. So we'll go to the drop down on the upper left where it says Apps, and we want to select Find More Apps. Once we get there, accept any things that pop up. Type in the word Sysmon, select Enter, and we want to go ahead and install the Splunk add-on for Sysmon. Now, this is asking you for your credentials for your Splunk account. So it's a little confusing. You logged into Splunk in this Splunk instance with different credentials, but so when you're installing apps, you actually have to log in with your Splunk app credentials. And I will recommend going ahead and letting it memorize that for now, store it in your browser. Generally a bad practice to store credentials on your browser, but in this case, it's fine because we're going to have to, for every app that we install, we're going to have to log in to our Splunk account. So it just makes life a little bit easier. So the next app that we want to run is called that we want to install is called PS Tree. Once again, search for it. Select install and agree to install. The next app is called SA Investigator. Once again, install. Now these apps will make it easy for us as we use different functionality of Splunk. Some of it, the stuff that we'll be doing, but we'll also be importing data set called the SOC data sets into our Splunk instance so we can do some exercises within our own environment. So next one is security essentials. Now we want the Splunk add-on for Apache server. Next one is the Splunk add-on for Microsoft Cloud Service. Next add-on is the Palo Alto. Next app we want to install is the Splunk add-on for Semantic. The next add-on is a SSL checker. We're going to hit restart later because we're going to restart all at once when we get them all installed. So the next add-on is the Splunk add-on for Microsoft IIS. Once again, we'll restart later. Now we want to do the Splunk add-on for Unix and Linux. Again, we'll restart later. And the next app we want to install, type in PowerShell. We want to install Hurricane Labs add-on for PowerShell, for Windows PowerShell transcript. Now we want the Splunk Stream add-on. Restart later. And the last one is the Splunk add-on for Microsoft Windows. Okay, now we will go ahead and select Restart Now. Okay, so it has restarted and I'm ready to log back in. So this is where it's confusing again. Now we're going to log back in with the credentials that we set up for this specific Splunk instance. So I'll sign in. Now what I'm going to walk through is how you set up the data inputs. So basically we'll go to the settings dropdown and we'll select data inputs. Now the way we're going to be using Splunk is we are just going to collect the Splunk logs from this specific system, but we select remote. What we're looking at now are the log sources that we're ready to collect. Okay, so when we're ready to start logging, what we'll do is we'll go to this page. So once again, it was from settings to data input. We'll choose remote event log collections, and then we'll just select enable, and that will turn on the logging. So as I mentioned before, there's a data cap and how much throughput we can use with our free account in Splunk. So what I do is basically I disable the input until I'm ready to conduct a test, and then we can enable it, conduct the test, ingest the logs, and then disable it when we're through with the test, and then we can still analyze the data that we collected while we were enabling the data collection. So now what we want to do is add a new event log collection. We want to add PowerShell. So to do that, go up to the upper right corner and select New Event Log Data. And we are going to call this PowerShell from the local host. We want to select the PowerShell event logs. Then we select Next. Host name, we had changed it, so we'll go ahead and change that to what we had changed the host field to previously. Click Review, and then click Done. So now, when we go to that input, data input, we got 2 remote event log collections. And right now we'll disable both of them. So just like I mentioned before, we only want to enable these when we're ready to do some kind of testing or experimentation, because we don't want to rack up a bunch of data flow that we could possibly exceed our limitation for the trial and the free account. Okay, that covers our initial configuration for the Windows VM number 1. Now the configuration for Windows VM number 2 is going to be very similar, except as I mentioned previously, we are not going to be installing Splunk on Windows VM number 2.